Welcome to the Building Interest podcast presented by Leader Bank. In season 2 of our podcast, we will be exploring what it means to be a leader through conversations with leaders from Leader Bank, from within the communities we serve, and from across the banking and technology industries. Each conversation will focus on our guest's personal leadership journey and provide some insights on what it means to be a good leader. To get things started today, we'll walk down memory lane with Leader Bank President Jay Tuli and discuss some highlights from season 1 of our podcast and more of what to expect in season 2. I'm your host, Greg Farber. Let's jump right in. Welcome back to the Building Interest podcast. I am excited to be joined today by Jay Tuli, President of Leader Bank. I think we're going to have some fun with today's episode. And since you were last on for our opening episode, we've had a variety of different guests, topics, conversations throughout the year. So I thought it might be fun if we did a little bit of a look back and talked about some of our favorite moments and takeaways from this past season, even as folks who live and breathe Leader Bank on a daily basis. I think both you and I learned some things from our own episodes. So Jay, welcome back.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I'm excited to be back. Good first season. A lot of interesting tidbits and learning. So excited to have a chat with you.
Yeah. How was it to kind of step back and enjoy our first season as a listener and not just as a participant?
It was cool. I mean, I was actually surprised and learned a lot of new things that about different folks on the team, their journeys, and, the way they do their business that I didn't necessarily know. So that was definitely cool.
I agree with that. One theme that I noticed a lot and we talked about in different episodes was kind of how COVID-19 changed the way we do business and really gave us an opportunity to step back and focus on what we do best. We talked a lot about our customer service. We talked about educating our clients and our customers, kind of advising folks not to get lost in bad press about the economy and stuff. I just feel like that was a really cool message that we were able to get out in a lot of these episodes. What are some of your thoughts on that, Jay?
Yeah, no. So I think you're right, Greg, that COVID affected, the entire bank, the entire industry, the entire world. And in some ways, it left a permanent effect too, where I don't think some things will ever go back to the way they were, even if COVID completely disappears. And so to that point, digitization has been pushed forward in a way that I don't think we had seen before. Like it was every year, everything was getting a little more digital. And then this did like 10 years worth of movement forward in 1 year. I think the way the bank operates, especially when it comes to team and culture and workforce, are going to be forever different. So yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things as a result of COVID.
Yeah, that really touches on a couple other episodes too that we had. You mentioned we had an episode on innovation. That was a favorite of mine. How we really put innovation and innovative thinking right at the forefront of what we're doing. And we always thought that way, but I think that, yes, the business changing really kind of pushed that. And for me, that episode highlighted our commitment to technology, not as like an ancillary product, but really as a core business approach. That passion, that energy, that excitement that our technology innovators bring to our banking experience.
Yeah, what was fun for me in that episode is just how passionate and excited Lindsay and Eric are to, just to be doing what they're doing and like improving the tech stack and our offerings every day. You could really hear it in them. So that was really cool to listen to.
Yeah, they talked about how they would go out of their way to ask other departments kind of where are the pain points, where can we innovate and do something better than we've done before.
Let me ask you a question, Greg.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we started the podcast this year's an experiment, like we do a lot of things at Leader Bank. You try it out and see where it goes. And we actually brought you in mid-year to host the podcast, and this was something you had never probably even thought about before. So, what's your journey been like? From joining this kind of wacky idea to sort of finishing a whole season of podcasts with different people.
It's really been not only a lot of fun, but actually also kind of eye-opening. And, we started off by saying that we learned new things about different groups in the bank that we didn't necessarily realize before. And my normal role gives me access to lots of different folks in lots of different departments, and yet not to the depth that we talk about in these episodes, and really get to know who our team members are, what relationships they have, what relationships they foster, how they bring on new folks, new team members, or innovation stuff. So for me, that was a really interesting journey to be a part of, exploring sort of the behind the scenes of what makes us who we are, and then getting that message out. And I think that's really cool. Like, you don't normally think of, oh yeah, every bank should have a podcast, because it's just not something that we necessarily associate with banking. And to bring that forward and to show that there is a space for this kind of information in banking, that's been really fun for me. And you're right, I had absolutely no idea this was coming. I never thought that I would be part of a podcast, and that's been really cool.
Have there been any like key learnings for you as a someone who's um, interviewing someone else? Have there been any like key things you've picked up that you could share?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to not have that traditional I ask a question, you give an answer type approach, like a news interview, but really to focus on trying to have a conversation and just steer that conversation in a direction that keeps things interesting and flowing, but to hear from people in a more casual conversation, and just sort of chat about what they're doing, and being able to get a little bit more insight that way than maybe to have a scripted question and answer session. So that's really been something interesting and insightful on my end. It's something that, yeah, not a skill I definitely thought I had.
What were some of your favorite podcasts, whether it was the content or the energy or the people or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the innovation one. We talked about that. Another favorite for me was episode 15, where we talked about culture and hiring and team member happiness. And one of the things that really stood out to me from that was this idea of team member engagement. And, I want to highlight that was again showcased this year, where we were voted one of the best places to work in Boston. We jumped from, I believe, spot 27 up to 13 among large employers. And that is a vibe that really showed in that episode how we approach hiring and team members and corporate culture, and transcends into some of those other episodes. What about you? You have a favorite that stands out for you, that really had like an aha moment where you thought this is a really neat topic that we covered?
I had a lot of favorites. One
And
that really brought me down memory lane was the one with Jim and Dave. And mainly because that was and I'm trying to remember which episode that was.
Episode 14.
That was 14.
Yep.
And part of it was because, it was over it was 13 years ago. So definitely it originated from 13 years ago. And that was a really both stressful and exciting time in the history of the bank, where, it was the height of the financial crisis. It was super scary. But in the midst of that, there was just wonderful opportunities that were also popping up. One of which for us was the ability to recruit the Needham team, which really set us on a path. And so hearing Jim and Dave talk about that and just recalling those early days, but also listening to how they've evolved as leaders to really be leading this massive mortgage powerhouse team was really cool. I also, I was in this one, so, that's not the reason I love this episode, but the one with Tom Shen, Tom's like a mentor to me. And I just loved how some of the themes he brought up are themes that we think about at the bank, even though, he's in technology and we're in banking. I thought that really was fascinating. And, I just love hearing Tom's stories.
Going back to the Jim and Dave episode, I like that one too. And I learned some things in there as well. I mean, I came on around the same time as Jim and Dave did, and I worked with them for many years. And I knew that they brought a lot of their team with them and stuff, but I really didn't understand how gelled and how passionate they were as a unit, that they have sales folks and operations folks and everyone that was really part of them before the Leader Bank days as well, and that they've been able to maintain that, keep that team together, growing, expanding. That was pretty exciting. I didn't even know those things, and I've worked with those guys for 13 years. And we are a bank, right? It's okay to talk about banking topics. I really liked episode 5 where we talked about business and banking, and that's a topic that was completely new to me. I know about regular banking because I'm a client of, I bank checking and savings and things like that. And I know about mortgage loans, and I was in that for many, many years. I had no idea about the complexity of municipal banking. And hearing Mark Rombos talk a little bit about how we think differently and we listened to what those municipalities need to find out how to do that right. That was really interesting to me to learn about that whole department. Speaking about culture, another takeaway for me was how excited all of our guests were to just share what they do, and not just our team members, but other folks that we brought on, realtor partners, financial planners, folks from other companies and industries, and just how they got there and why they do it, and that passion that we can share within how we run our operation. You mentioned Tom Shen. Any other thoughts on kind of how we have that cross-industry passion for what we do?
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought the Mike King episode and Kathy Wentworth, where they're both loan officers for Leader Bank, and they brought on strong realtor partners. What was really cool to see in those is just how strong the relationships are, and how like they could almost like finish each other's sentences. Like,
yes,
there's so much trust that's built into those relationships that that kind of sets the stage for that client referral. And so like we know we work with realtors. We know that is a big, huge part of our business, but to actually see an example of a realtor and a loan officer together and how they form that relationship, that was super cool.
That was, and I agree. They were just about finishing each other's sentences, weren't they? That was kind of neat to see that they had that real good rapport.
So, Greg, based on our first season and all the different ways in which we kind of moved and pivoted and topics and the learnings we had, what do you think we can expect for season 2?
Right. We have been talking about this, and 3 sort of keywords came to mind, and they're not the fanciest words in the dictionary. We try stuff, we pivot, we learn. And we do that in our banking operation, but we're also in the midst of doing that here in this podcast. And I feel exactly that. We tried stuff. We said, what are some interesting folks and some interesting departments that we can bring in? We can learn about different products. And as you and I said, we learned a lot of interesting things. But there's only so much that we can talk about a checking account or a loan product. And at some point that becomes kind of stale. But we all have a leader within. We may not recognize it. It may not be something we do at work. It may be subconscious. We may be put in a situation where we're in a meeting and it just needs to get sort of pushed along. Or it may be something at home. It may be coaching a kid's softball team or something like that, where we have leadership qualities within us. And I think it would be really fascinating to try to really dig into that and find out all the different kinds of leadership qualities that folks have and highlight those. We are Leader Bank, might as well focus on leadership.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think I've mentioned this to you and others on the team that the podcasts I've really gotten most excited about are where we really get to like the inner workings of what makes someone special, what makes someone that top performer, what allows someone to have that gift that they have. So the irony in a way is that although we're a bank, I think the value, the more interesting podcast would actually not be about banking specific items,
yep,
but more about, like you said, the superpowers behind whatever guest we have. And I think through that journey of highlighting different people on our team, that also gives folks a window into our culture or how we think or how we operate, which helps build those relationships, which, at the end of the day, that's how we've grown.
I kind of want to pivot at this point. There's that word again. And also look back a little bit on 20 years of Leader Bank. And this has been a monumental year for us. The bank turned 20 years old. And our listeners know you as the president of the bank, but many may not know that you grew up living and breathing the leader brand pretty much from the day you were born. For background, your father first started what was then Leader Mortgage in 1986, most recently the bank in 2002. And a lot of kids swear they'll never do what their parents do. I'm one of those. I was like, no way am I doing what my parents do. And others can't wait to take over the family business. And so you're now president of Leader Bank, but you are not a carbon copy of your dad. And I was just curious to hear if you could talk a little bit about how you became a leader in your own right, and what does leadership mean to you personally?
Mm, great question. So, I mean, there wasn't any grand plan with this in a way, though there was an inkling that maybe one day we'll work together.
It was an organic thing that just sort of happened.
It in a way it was. It's I feel like you always have a general plan. One day you could do something, and maybe not a specific plan of how to get there until opportunities start to arise and you can jump on them. Anyways, I was doing investment banking, and I worked for a small boutique investment bank in Boston, and it was in the tech. It was a software mergers and acquisitions investment bank. So, prior to Leader, I was definitely in that like intersection of tech and finance a bit, and I always thought that was pretty cool. Anyways, I was just a little burnt out and overwhelmed from the hours that I was working, and through a casual dinner conversation with my dad, the bank was 3 years old at that time. He sort of said, "Hey, why don't you join me and let's see where this goes?" And so that's all it was. It was just sort of another little experiment. Hey, I'll work. Let's see how this goes. And we really haven't looked back. Of course, like working with a parent is not necessarily an intuitive thing, like right off the bat. But I think after the first 6 to 9 months, we got our groove pretty well, and we've maintained that. I mean, I'm actually surprised how well we work together, and I think it's a very deliberate commitment on both sides. But going to your part about becoming my own leader, I just think as the bank continued to grow, I gained more confidence. I definitely had a chip on my shoulder in the beginning where it was like, okay, yeah, I work at this bank because my dad's the CEO, and am I worthy and all that other type of stuff. Those are like natural things probably for one to think, and I definitely did. And I think as the bank grew and we tried different things, some of those things really being definitely an imprint of my efforts or my team's efforts. And we started to see the bank go in slightly different ways. You build confidence and you get excited and all that type of stuff. And but I would say a lot of the values of the bank are really rooted in my dad's founding philosophy, which I wholeheartedly love and agree with. All the things in our brand Bible. Roll up your sleeves with dedication, teamwork, continuous improvement, humility, community. I mean, these are things, if one were to describe Sushil Tuli, I think a lot of people would just use these words. Yet they make sense too for operating a great business. And so I think that's kind of cool.
So a lot of the same fundamental vision and values and ethics and all that, but then just two different styles to communicate that same vision forward.
Yeah, totally.
That's really neat. Any specific moments or milestones along the way that kind of stand out to you as being instrumental in whether it's the bank's growth or even your own success that really were maybe something stands out that got us to where we are to be here 20 years later? Or is it really just an overall success that's the totality of a bunch of smaller successes?
There were a few pivotal moments.
And you don't have to share them all, but maybe just something that stands out to you.
As it pertains to your question about me becoming more comfortable in my own role, one pivotal moment was the creation of the Zugma Rewards account.
Okay.
And to back up, we're a small bank. doing a huge amount of mortgage volume because, as we just referenced, we were able to bring on the Needham team, which I was part of that effort. But that was definitely in the wheelhouse of stuff we were already doing. And so the challenge always is deposits. How do we grow deposits? Because we have more than enough loans. And so we were really trying to get creative. And we had looked at a bunch of other interesting programs that we could maybe, look at or partner with vendors to offer an innovative checking account. And ultimately we decided they're too expensive and let's try it ourselves. So Zugma was created. What's interesting about this is it was the first product, I would say, Leader Bank created from scratch, i.e., it wasn't something we just used from a core provider. It wasn't just like a fintech we just partnered with. Like, we actually built something for the first time.
So it was the birth of that innovative spirit that we talked about earlier.
It was the birth of that. And it wasn't, what we had was how the product would work to the client. We had that sketched out. How we would do it behind the scenes was sort of like not fully sketched out, and we sort of said, okay, let's figure it out. And anyways, we launched it, and obviously as the product grew and grew and grew, we automated more of the back end and all that stuff. But what was exciting about it is pretty quickly we exceeded like 1,500 clients, and so that was the first time, and a significant amount of balances. And that was the first time we said, wow, if we develop products that clients really like, this is a source of growth. And so that and many people may not see the Zugma Rewards account as having that much impact in Leader Bank, but as far as like a first stepping stone, that was it.
See, this is exactly what I was talking about. I didn't know that. I knew that we made it, but I didn't know that real impact and that history behind it. That's really cool to learn.
Yeah.
I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that personal leadership skill again, too. We kind of teased that we want to talk about that more next season. And when you joined Leader in 2006 and I came on in 2009, and we were both young professionals, we were kind of looking to build our careers. And now in the years that have passed, we've started our own families and we've had personal milestones along the way. And I know for me that has really changed in a positive way my outlook on kind of approaching to business. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on going from that driven young professional to now being a family man and how you approach business.
Productivity and how you spend your time is a huge lesson I think I've learned after having kids. You don't have as much time. So every moment you spend, it better be spent the right way because you're potentially taking that way away from a kid. Right. And so you just gotta, it's forced me to be like a lot more thoughtful on what I'm doing, what I'm spending my time on, who I'm spending with. And if I am spending it with someone, like what should the outcome of that time be? It's better if it's like a really awesome experience, it's like worthwhile and all that stuff. So yeah, I think productivity is a natural outcome. A lot of people feel, probably, but certainly me. I think the other thing is this whole concept of these are little beings that are learning everything they observe. And so I had this big realization, and I don't know how it came, and it's an obvious one probably to most, but from reading a book or seeing a video or something like that, like I should be the best form of myself during these formative years. Like, obviously I want to be the best form of myself, but I never really had that impetus to do it, but now I do, because if they're going to observe all my habits. So in other words, I will pass on my bad habits potentially. And I'll pass on my good habits too.
Right. No, those are really insightful. I mean, I really think that what you mentioned about productivity is interesting too, because we do have to compartmentalize our time so much more efficiently to make space for work, for ourselves, for our kids. And somewhere you get the sense somebody has to take a back seat, but we really still want to be there for all those components of our lives. I learned an interesting lesson kind of along those lines along the way, where I saw something that said, when your child comes to you and wants to tell you something or shows you something, act like it's the most amazing, interesting thing in the world, even if it's not. Because, like you mentioned, in those formative years, then if they want to come to you with something big, serious later down the road, they know that you are actually paying attention and listening.
That's good.
And I thought that that was actually, that really changed my approach to business as well, because it's easy if someone comes to you kind of with a small question or something, like to kind of be like, hey, go figure it out. No, it's not important.
Right.
But instead to really take that approach of, hey, wait a minute, that's a really good question. Or maybe they really do need a little bit of help with this, or they have a new angle or approach to something. I think that being that family man, I guess, has shown me that it's important to step back and see where other people are coming from a bit more, because they don't have necessarily the same perspective that I have coming into a conversation or a meeting or a project, just like you would have that same sort of dynamic at home with a kid.
Yeah. No, that's I love that. I think also like you have to practice, or at least I've had to practice being teacher more with them, because I ask a lot of questions,
But in a
breaking,
supportive way. You can't break them down by teaching them. You have to lift them up.
right. And breaking down, more complicated concepts into a simple form to explain to someone. That's a skill set that's really useful with your kids. It's also really useful for business concepts or whatever. So yeah, I think there's a lot of learning.
So just a little wild card question to make it fun here. Any thoughts on something that, maybe our listeners will be surprised to hear? People don't realize that banking, that something goes on in running the scenes, behind the scenes and running a bank, something that, wow, really, they do all that? I have these moments all the time where I learn about a new function that we have, and I never realized that banking required us to do X, Y, Z. I was just curious if you had any kind of thoughts on, there's something that's just so weird, but we couldn't run a bank without it.
I think the average client might be surprised with how many vendor partners we at a bank have to manage.
That's really interesting. I'm surprised by that too sometimes.
Yeah, like I think we sort of mapped out that a loan from application, no, sorry, from pre-approval letter, all the way to closing, there might be 50 vendors touching that loan. So I think for because everything is in, the way the tech stack is presented is this cohesive, ideally it's this cohesive view. But I think clients are sometimes surprised that behind the scenes, it's like managing a whole swarm of different vendors and getting them to work together and all of that stuff.
I definitely agree with that. And just having seen, we're going back to the innovation episode with Eric and Lindsay, the sheer number of interesting opportunities they have uncovered where we can improve our services through different vendors and different available products in the marketplace. That is, in fact, you're right. You would have no idea that goes on behind the scenes.
I think also another thing, sometimes people are surprised with the bank is, it really requires a big sales organization to run it. So sometimes when I talk to folks, the assumption is like, oh, people just like walk in and like, this is how it works. And it's like, no one just like randomly shows at your door. There's people working hard, whether it's branch managers or loan officers or bankers or like whatever it is. Getting clients is like not an easy task. It's not an obvious thing. And our sales organization is a really big piece of it. And I think in financial services, that's usually not the first thing you think about. Usually people think about it as more like risk management and compliance, like that type of stuff. But that's another thing.
I like that. That is really neat insight. So we've done a lot of looking back in this episode. Let's turn around and briefly look forward. Anything exciting we should expect coming? What do we got coming up at Leader Bank in 2023?
Well, one thing I'm really pumped about, and we've been working on this for a year, is Leader Insurance. So we've been thinking about insurance offering for like probably a decade, just not something we prioritized on. And finally, 2022, we decided, okay, this is going to come up the priority list. We really want to launch this. And it's been a super fun process, everything from the ideation to the forecasting and modeling, recruiting the team, thinking through the tech stack, and the integration to the launch. And so I think it's going to do great, and I'm really excited about it.
So how does insurance overlap with banking? What kind of insurance are we talking about here?
Yeah, so we're talking about basically consumer lines, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, and personal umbrella lines. And the reason that's relevant, like, I always talk about how we need to be focused and we can't do like all sorts of random products because we'll kind of dilute our efforts. But the reason this is relevant is because we have such a large mortgage business. So we're financing so many people who are buying their homes every day. And in every transaction, you need insurance to insure that home. And often what happens is while we're helping someone buy their home with the lending, they have to then go off in a separate track and find an insurance provider and get a quote and get the binder and get all the information to them and then come back to us. And so what we're trying to do is use the data we already have for that client, help streamline the process, make it really simple and easy, and get them a great quote.
Awesome. I mean, that is in fact exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that roll out myself. Jay, any other thoughts on the year we've wrapped up here?
I think it's been a lot of fun. I think it's just been great to have people on, both internal and external. I frequently hear folks who listen to our podcast, and I can sense they can feel like the energy and the excitement and the passion. And I think if that's what people take, in many ways we've accomplished what we were trying to do, which is to really, open up a taste of what Leader Bank is to everyone else.
This has been an awful lot of fun. I think this was an interesting episode. I think it was really fun to look back at the bank's history and a little bit at the podcast's 1 year history. And I'm really excited to see what we do. So I really want to thank you for making the time, coming on today, and on to an exciting 2023.
Likewise. Thank you for hosting, Greg. Thank you, Sydney and Ryan, on the production side and all the planning that goes into this. Really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners, we are very excited. Stay tuned for some really fun episodes.
For more information on today's subject, visit leaderbank.com. In addition to past episodes, you can also find our corresponding blog entries for more insights. This podcast is a production of Leader Bank NA, Equal Housing Lender, member FDIC, NMLS number 449250.